Okay, good morning, people. Nice to see you here this morning. Some of you in social justice, I didn't get to see you, but I got to message a few of you, so that was cool. But let's see. So Lily's here. Good morning, Lily. Good morning, Cindy. Good morning, Jenna. Good morning, Nasheed. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, Min and Thika. Good evening. And Pearly, good morning. Since some of us are all over the globe. If you're in Vancouver this morning, you'll see that it's kind of a little rainy and gray out. That's okay. So as we wait for people to trickle in here, what we'll do today, good morning, Adelbert. What we'll do today is we will tie up some loose ends about the Han Dynasty. We'll finish our questions that we answered. I will assign you another little micropaper. We'll talk a little bit about the last one, and then that'll be today. So we will probably finish a little on the early side today, but you can use that extra time to work on your micropaper. So yeah, that's I think what today will look like. Hello, Ella. Good evening to you. And Aliana, good morning. Hello. And Luan is here too. Hello, Luan. Good morning. Okay, so let's. Give me 1 second here. I'm just gonna pull something up. Okay. Here we go. Let's dive into this. Okay. So you'll remember that yesterday we finished watching that documentary on the first Qin emperor, right? And we said that the first Qin emperor brings this warring states period to a close. That happened at the end of the Zhou, where kingdoms started fighting with each other. Good morning, KC, and good morning, Sam, and good morning, Carmen. States were fighting with each other for power and domination. That went on for really hundreds of years until finally one king, the Qin king, is able to bring all of these states under his own control, declares himself an emperor, and ushers in a very short period of stability under the rule of this emperor, right? We also talked a little bit about the fact that the Qin Empire was based on some earlier political reforms by a Zhou counselor named Shenyang, right? And Shenyang kind of created a legalistic system, right, where the emperor could maintain full control over the country and the people's country. The people's country. What am I saying? Over the people and over the country, and that was done. That was done based on some ideas about organization. So Shenyang suggested that farmers should be organized into teams and should be responsible for one another and should be rewarded as a group and punished as a group. And so that sort of ensured that the farming population kept each other in line, right? And we also said that the Qin state had a very clear legal code with very clear punishments. And as you might imagine, some of those punishments were pretty brutal. And in the film, we saw some brutal punishments. We saw a prime minister get poisoned. We saw the prime minister's associate get pulled apart by horses, which seems quite brutal and awful. We saw lots of intellectuals buried alive simply because they were intellectuals and they didn't agree with the emperor. So there were rewards and punishments in this system. There was a very clear legal code, and some of those punishments were pretty extreme and pretty brutal. As we saw in the film yesterday, the Qin emperor is going to die, despite his best efforts to gain immortality and stay alive forever. He decides his path to immortality is to consume mercury, right? Which is a bad choice. We know mercury is quite toxic to humans, and so instead of prolonging his life indefinitely, it probably ends his life early, right? So that brings us to these questions that I asked you yesterday from the textbook. And so, how does the Han Dynasty begin? Okay, so we know, of course, that the Qin Emperor will die, but how do we get to Han Dynasty? Okay, so Cindy says, after the first emperor died, so the Qin Emperor in 210 BC, yeah, the Qin Empire rapidly disintegrated. Yes, it did. Let's see what else we have here. Casey says, a farmer, Liu Bang, rebelled and built an army to defeat his enemies and declared himself the emperor of a new dynasty. That is true too. So, one piece of this, of course, is the first emperor dies. The first emperor dies. I'm just going to give you a second to add some more answers there. I don't want to answer before everything has come in, so I'll wait just a few seconds more. Okay, so, yes, the first emperor dies, and he is succeeded by one of his sons, and I think there might be a couple of sons after that. And so, the problem, though, the issue with this situation is that the Qin Emperor was keeping everyone under control because of his personal power, right? It was him and his ability to rule, his ability to inspire fear through punishment. That's what was kind of keeping that empire together, right? That fear of Qin. But now he's dead, somebody takes over for him, and if that person isn't as strong or as charismatic or as frightening as Qin is, the people start to push back, right? The people start to rebel, and that's what Karen is saying here. The emperor dies, and people don't like the new emperor, and this leads to rebellions. Yeah, so this is kind of the problem with having one single leader with all the power, right? Is that the health of the state, the stability of the state, is entirely reliant on that one person. And so if that one person is a good ruler, if they're a strong, competent ruler, or if they're just super scary and everyone is afraid to disobey them, everything stays kind of stable and under control, right? But if that person dies and they're replaced by someone who's not as charismatic or not as competent or not nearly as scary, the problem is that people rebel, right? People start to push back, and they do because they've been under they've been under a fairly kind of strict system of law, right? A strict system of punishment. And so the Qin Emperor was very kind of disciplinary, and so the people were a little bit scared of him. But then after he dies, his successors are weaker and not as scary. And so, yeah, you're right. They start to rebel. And so officials and peasants rebel, and then there's a civil war, right? So people start to fight within the empire until finally this one farmer here, Liu Bang, he defeats his enemies and declares himself the emperor of a new dynasty, right? Good stuff. And then, so Liu Bang becomes the first emperor of the Han dynasty. And the Han will be important because, again, it will inherit some political and legal structures from the Qin dynasty, but it will also serve as a foundation for all of the empires to come after the Han. And the Han will last for about 400 years. That's a long period, right? So many things become established during the Han Empire, and those things will persist, right, into future empires, and to some degree maybe even into Chinese culture and society today, right? Okay, so the second question I asked you was, what was Han society like? So what were people like? What kind of jobs were they doing? Things like that. And so Cindy says here that 90% were farmers, okay? And that's probably consistent with most of the ancient civilizations and empires that you would come across in this period. Um, Most people are still farmers, but not everyone has to be a farmer. So we've got other people who are able to do other things, right? And Cindy lists here there's about 10% of people who are living in cities. They are government employees, members of the bureaucracy, artisans, soldiers, um, government officials, things like that. Oh, look at all these answers, you guys. You're making my day here. Yeah, so most people are farmers, and interestingly, China will remain a strongly agricultural country, um, really right up until the 1950s, basically, when Mao takes over and declares People's Republic of China. China is still a predominantly agricultural nation, and so this is something that will kind of stretch almost up to the present day, where we have a mostly agricultural population 2,000 years ago, and that will persist for quite a long time before Mao modernizes China. Yeah, okay, so who am I going to go to? KC. So a majority of the people were farmers or tenants. Yeah, so they were farmers, but they were paying rent in order to stay on a piece of land and farm it. And there were local magnates with large estates, and the remaining people lived in urban areas. Yeah, so some people own their own farms. Some people work on someone else's farm and pay rent. And then there's some people who own lots of land and they rent out their land to people in order to farm, right? So some people are actual farmers, some people are just renting land to farmers. Curly says these commoner classes were governed by a highly organized state. Yes, but we'll get to that in just a second. I'm going to save that one, Pearly. Yeah, so 90% of the population are farmers, good, living village life, and some people are landlords. That landlordism thing is the idea that some people have own land and they are renting it to these farmers, and the farmers farm the land, okay? Okay, so how does this empire govern itself? Okay, so I'm going to jump back to you, Pearly, here, and I'm going to say that the Han governed itself according to a highly organized state with educated civil servants. So we have the emperor right at the top, but we have a lot of government officials. We have people who are working for the government. And so in modern societies, we call this the bureaucracy or the civil service. These are not the people in power, but they're the people who do government work. And so we're probably all familiar with these types of people. If you've gone to get your passport renewed or gone to apply for a study permit, or really any other interaction with the government, you're dealing with the bureaucracy. You're dealing with the civil service, the people who do the work of government, right? So already in the Han Dynasty, we have a civil service. We have a bureaucracy in place that's doing the work of government. Pearly also said, that the government relied heavily on the first group. Who's the first group, Pearly? I know who the first group is. The first group is farmers, right? And that makes sense, right? Because if 90% of your population are farmers, where is all your tax money coming from? It's not coming from the very few rich people. It's coming from all of those farmers, right? That's where your tax revenues come from. So the Han is governing itself. Cindy says the Han inherited the Qin legalist system, right? Which actually they inherited from the later Zhou period, which is kind of interesting, right? This legalism system continued through these dynasties, right? Let's see. Pika says the Han inherited the legal system of the government. Good. With an emphasis on efficient and sound governance and the use of reward and punishment systems. Okay, good. Casey says the empire was divided into 100 commanderies. I'm going to say commanderies and 1,300 counties. And these counties handled tax collection, population registration, military service, law and order, public works, and the heads of ministries with two chancellors decide all policy matters. Yeah, interesting. Pearlie says an independent branch of government censored it, audited the rest, and reported directly to the emperor. Yeah, and so what's really interesting about this system here is that they're almost describing a modern state, right? Where you have multiple levels of government, right? Those different levels of government are responsible for different things. And then there's a body on the outside that kind of keeps track and makes sure everyone's doing their job. And then there's somebody at the top. So to compare with here in Canada, obviously I can't speak to all of your countries because I don't know exactly how all of your countries work. But here in Canada, we have basically 3 levels of government, right? So we have a municipal government here in Vancouver, and they take care of things like the parks and the roads. They collect property taxes. They put parking meters all over the place, and so they collect parking revenue. They kind of do things like that at the city level, right? Then we have a provincial government, and the provincial government in BC handles things like healthcare and education and things like that. And then, of course, we have a federal government. We have a government for the entire country. And so Justin Trudeau and his people look after things that have national implications, that have national effects. And Justin Trudeau's government deals with other countries, right? They set foreign policy. And so in Canada here, we have sort of a multi-level system of government. And here, all the way back in the Han Dynasty, they have a very similar thing, right? Where we have local governments taking care of local matters, and then people on top of them who are looking after other things. And this censorate, which Pearlie mentions, most sort of modern countries have that as well. And so here in Canada, we have an Auditor General. And so the Auditor General does this exact thing. They're kind of independent, and they check all the other parts of government and make sure that they are doing their job and spending their money correctly and so on. So it's very interesting that about 2,000 years ago, we have this model of a state appearing in Imperial China, and it's not so different in some ways from the ways that modern states organize themselves. Of course, here we have a single ruler, right? An emperor. In Canada, we don't have that. Justin Trudeau is not an emperor, right, Justin? He is not an emperor. So we have obvious differences, but it's very interesting how Han China has kind of created a basic blueprint for a state, right? They are literally running a modern state 2,000 years ago, which is really interesting. Right. Our good friend Confucius comes back, right? We watched a documentary on Confucius. We saw him kind of struggle to be politically successful and sort of fail at being politically successful. But he developed a set of ideas that he took from the past, took from sort of the early Zhou period, and reimagined them for the time he was in. He taught them to his 70 students, and they traveled around trying to teach this new ideology, right? This new way of having a stable, good society. But not a lot of people were paying attention to Confucius at the time, right? Not a lot of people were listening. And so we saw in the video that when Confucius died, he felt kind of defeated, right? He felt like, nobody listened to me. I wasn't able to change society. I failed, right? He kind of felt like he failed. But here, when we get to the Han Dynasty, it seems that he does not fail, right? His ideas are actually going to be worked into the state and used as a way to organize them. And so that's what I'm going to go to Cindy first and then Pearly. Cindy says, so his Confucius' ideas provide a blueprint for how political and social order should function. Yeah, so the Han ideas and mix them into the running of the state, right? Sorry, I'm gonna add. So his idea of filial piety, right? So the fact that you should honor your elders and honor your mother and your father and live up to your family responsibilities. That's part of it. Was celebrated in texts, right? And so Pearly says the Han rulers saw the benefit of Confucian ideas to governing. During Emperor Wu's reign, Confucius' ideas were molded into imperial Confucianism. Yeah, good. So this is what they referred to in the documentary, right? They said that when the first Han emperors come to power, so when Liu Bang comes to power, he looks back at the Qin emperor and the successor to the Qin emperor, and sees that they were kind of ruling in a very harsh, brutal fashion with lots of punishments, right? And so when the Han emperor comes to power, when Liu Bang comes to power, the recommendation is, we can differentiate ourselves, we can make ourselves seem different by moving away from that very harsh, punitive government system and creating a different one, right? And so that's when they start using Confucian ideas to influence how they rule the people and how they want the people to behave, right? So the Qin emperors are saying, don't do this or else big trouble, right? And the Han emperors are saying, this is how society should run. This is how you be a good, noble person, right? So it's a totally different way of ruling, right? Reward and punishment versus ethical and moral behavior, right? Two very different ideas. Thika says Confucius' ideas, were molded into an ideology, of monarchy and a decentralized social order. Okay, very good. So finally, in this period, this is a few hundred years after Confucius, finally we see his ideas worked into the government of society and how society worked. And so I don't know if Confucius is in heaven or in the afterlife or whatever, but if he was, at all aware of what happened during the Han Dynasty, he probably would have been happy, right? He probably would have been happy that his ideas were finally accepted and finally kind of worked into how society operated. Okay, and then the last one, I asked you, what's the Silk Road? The Silk Road. And so Cindy says, right, so we hear about news of trade routes extending from oasis city-states ringing the forbidding deserts of the Taklamakan Desert to countries lying beyond the Pamir Mountains. Okay, so it's a trade route, right? And where's my map here? Where's my map? Yeah, here it is. So the Silk Road, and so Cindy says that it is, it starts out as this trade route that sort of moves through Central Asia, right? And so you can see the Talkamalkan Desert right in the center there, and the Pamir Mountains. Are they listed here? I do not see them. Okay. So yeah, we have this existing trade route that exists where people are trading silk with countries to the west, right? So that's good. Karen says, yeah, it's a trade route that connects Asia to Europe, or what would eventually be Europe. That's very true. Yeah, trade route linking China with the West. Good. And so this kind of trade route was already in existence before the Han Dynasty, right? But Han rulers are able to make it more safe, right? So we have an extension here of the Great Wall that happens during the Qin Empire. And then the Han empires kind of move into these sort of light green areas that you see, and they set up military camps there. And so they're basically protecting that area. They kind of take it over, but they sort of make it safe. And so you can imagine that they act as kind of a police force to ensure people don't get robbed or murdered, out in these areas. And the same thing for this sort of Talcamalcan Desert. That's under the protection of the Han as well. And so the Han emperors send their military out there to make these trade routes safe, right? And when the trade routes are safe, people feel more confident going out there with all of their expensive stuff and trading with people far away. And so the safer trade is, the more trade that happens. And the more trade that happens, the more money everybody makes. And so the Han Empire is kind of instrumental in protecting this section of the Silk Road here. And as a result, there are economic benefits, right, for China as there's increased trade going along the Silk Road. Okay, that's really good, people. Now, let's switch gears a little bit, okay? So I'm going to assign you another micropaper very shortly, like in 10 minutes here. But I just want to talk a little bit about the last one, okay? So in the last micropaper, what I asked you to do was to write a short research paper that summarizes 3 of the 5 characteristics of religion for a particular world religion, right? And so these were the 5 characteristics, if you recall. This sort of existence of supernatural powers, this sort of rationalization with myth, the reduction of anxiety and the teaching of a moral order, a convenient way to transfer the burden of decision making from individuals to supernatural powers, and a mechanism of social control. Okay, so those were the 5. Whoops. And so when I read through them, most people, a good portion of people actually did that. Some people basically just gave me a summary of a religion, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted you to choose those characteristics, those 3 characteristics, and show me how you saw them appearing in that particular religion. So there was a little bit of research and there was a little bit of summary, but there was also a little bit of you understanding the characteristics of religion and then being able to see those characteristics in the religion you were researching. Okay, so there was a couple of things going on there. There was the research, there was the, that's okay, Ying, there was the research, there was the summary, but there was also you expressing your understanding, right? Taking these concepts of characteristics of religion that apply to really all religions in some way, and showing me how they show up in that one religion, okay? And so, again, some people did a good job with that. Some people just gave me a summary of religion, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted those characteristics, okay? So, that said, let's move on to what I'd like you to do for this one. So, this one will be broadly similar, okay? So it's a short basically 1-page paper. You can go a little bit over if you want. It's no big deal. I'm just trying to give you a general idea of how long it should be. Again, it'll have a little introduction, a little conclusion. Most of you did a really good job with your introductions and conclusions. They were just really short and allowed you to sort of jump right in, so that was really good. Citing of sources was kind of hit or miss. Some people did a really good job and nailed it. Some people, their formatting was a little off. Some people need to look at what their formatting should be because they didn't format properly at all. So you do need to cite your source, and you do need to do it properly. Some people did that, some people less so. So for this micropaper, you can see there's kind of 2 big paragraphs here. You can see a cultural, historical aspect, and then there's a response. And so what I'd like you to do is this. I would like you to write a short micropaper, a short research paper, just like last time. And in your first paragraph, I would like you to summarize a little bit of research that you do into one aspect of the dynasties of imperial China that we haven't covered. And so after the Han Dynasty, we have this collection of dynasties that come later, and I've listed them here, okay? So I want you to choose one of them and report back to me, do some research on one particular aspect of one of these dynasties, okay? So it could be religious or spiritual thought. It could be their governance system or their law code. It could be their subsistence practices, like how they're getting their food. It could be a historical event that happens within one of those dynasties. And any particular cultural or historical aspect of one of those dynasties, okay? And so again, you're not going to tell me about the whole dynasty. You're not going to tell me about the entire history of the dynasty. You're just going to tell me about one particular thing that happens within that dynasty. So let's say I was writing my paper on the Han Dynasty, okay? You're not allowed to because we already did it, but let's say that that's what I was doing. So I might pick the integration of imperial Confucianism as my thing, okay? So I might do some research into that, and I might write a short little paragraph summary right here, just like in the green section, and I might tell the teacher about what imperial Confucianism is, okay? That it's based on these ideas from Confucius hundreds of years ago. This is some of the basic idea of Confucianism, and it was integrated into the state in order to allow the Han emperors to maintain power and to distinguish themselves from the Qin emperors that came before, who were a little bit more kind of violent and brutal. Okay, so that's step 1. Now, step 2 is this. In your response paragraph, so the second paragraph of your little paper, I would like you to explain how that important aspect of the dynasty, so in my case, in my example here, it's imperial Confucianism, how it can be understood in the context of our modern world. So how does this piece of culture or culture history inform me about the present? And so in this respect, I could look at how Confucianism still appears in modern Chinese society today, if I knew something about that. Or I could say how it doesn't appear at all in modern Chinese society today, if I knew something about that. Or I could look at how philosophical or moral ideas are become a part of the governance of a state, okay? And so I know I'm being really vague about this, but part of this response paragraph will depend on what you already know and what your experience is. And so what I'm hoping is that you will do a little bit of research on one of these dynasties, and you'll see something that makes you say, hey, I that feels familiar, right? This thing that's happening hundreds of years ago, that kind of seems connected or similar in a way to something I already know about that happens in the modern world. Okay, and so I don't really know what you're going to say, because I'm hoping that as you look through some of these dynasties, something will occur to you and you'll say, oh, I can make a connection there, right? I can see a reflection of the modern world. I can see a reflection of my experience. I can see that in the past. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for you to do. Okay. So yeah, so there's two parts. There's a little research part on one of the dynasties of ancient China, and then there's a little response paragraph where you tell me how you see this thing connected to the modern world or to your current experience. Okay. So don't forget, you can go to the Columbia College Library and go to find materials and look in databases. You'll go to your database page, and some of these might work for you. I'm not sure if Global Road Warrior still operates or not, but Britannica and World Book and even MAS Ultra might be useful places for you to look. Yeah, and you can search there. Also keep in mind that if you go out on the internet, you need to find something that is credible, right? So again, I think I put this up last time where we talked about look for things that are accurate and well written. Look for sources that have an author who we can actually figure out who they are. Look for things that are more current, although with ancient history it doesn't matter quite so much, but have a look at it. Content and fairness probably isn't that important here either, but you can use it for other things. And of course, relevant. Is it relevant to your topic? So you want to make sure if you go to other internet sources that you are looking at something that is believable and reliable, and that we feel that we can trust the source, right? And then one of the things that we had a few issues with this time was plagiarism. Okay, so you cannot simply take someone else's words and put them into your paper and use them as your own. You can't do that. Okay, it's an academic no-no, and it doesn't give me anything to mark, right? Because I'm trying to mark your research, I'm trying to mark your writing, I'm trying to mark your thinking and your understanding. And so you can imagine if you just took somebody else's words and put them into your paper, that doesn't really tell me anything, right? It just tells me that you can copy and paste, which I already know you can do that. We can all do it. So let me show you this. I didn't show you this last time, but what you want to do when you are using other people's, Ella, this will be due, I think, on the 21st, July 21st. And actually, before I go into this, I think it's due July 21st, and I put a copy of, I will put a copy of the assignment in Microsoft Teams and in course documents. I just don't think I had a chance to do that yet, but I'll do that right after we're done, okay? So what you want to do when you're using information from another source is you want to paraphrase, right? You want to express the information in your own words, okay? So have a look at this really quickly. And if you're in social justice, you saw this already, but that's okay, you can see it again. So if you look at these two very short paragraphs here, you'll see that we have good paraphrasing, okay? So the original section that somebody might have looked at for research says that, students frequently overuse direct quotation in taking notes, and as a result, they overuse quotations in the final research paper. It goes on to say a few things, right? Only 10% should be quoted. You should strive to limit the amount of exact transcribing of source material while taking notes, right? So This is an original source, and as you can see, it's kind of a tip for note-taking and for writing. And so the second one is a good way to paraphrase, a good way to say basically the same thing, but in your own words. Okay, so you can see here that the person who's paraphrased this has totally rewrote it. They've used their own words, but they have cited their source, right? It comes from this James Lester's book. Now, here we have not a paraphrase. That's okay, Jimmy. Here we have not a paraphrase, but just a summary, right? And so this is just the main point of what James Lester is saying. He's saying students should take just a few notes and direct quotations so that they minimize the amount of quotes in their paper, right? That's a very quick summary, but again, they've also cited the source. So we know that this is what James Lester is saying, right? This is what he is saying. Now here's where we get into plagiarism, okay? So again, you'll see the first paragraph at the top is the same one that we've seen on 3 slides already, but look at the one on the bottom. You'll see lots of the same words, and then the person who's written this plagiarized version has just kind of switched out a few words, right? They've done, they've used a thesaurus or whatever, and they have basically copied the entire thing, and they've just swapped out some words. But that's not enough, okay? So again, this is a bit of a skill for you to learn. You definitely can't just copy and paste things into your own paper. Again, that's an academic no-no, and it doesn't really give me anything to mark because I want to mark your stuff. I want to mark your thoughts. I don't want to mark somebody else's, right? And so this is what you don't want to do. You definitely don't want to copy and paste directly, and you don't want to copy and paste and then switch a few words. It's not good enough, okay? So you have to do something more like this, where you read it, you understand it, and then you kind of rewrite it in your own words. And then you cite your source at the end so I know where the information came from, okay? So that's what you need to do. Copy and pasting, no, okay? All right, so that said, I think what I'll let you do then is I will let you get to work on doing a bit of research and seeing if you can find some sort of link, some connection between one of these ancient imperial Chinese dynasties and something that might be connected to our modern world. And so it could be something happening within your country, could be something happening within this country, within Canada, could be sort of a world event. It could be something personal if I'm not really sure what you'll find, but I do want you to look into one cultural or historical aspect of one of those dynasties and then try to make a connection to our modern life or our modern world or the world that you live in, okay? Which might be a little tricky and might not be, I'm not sure yet. Okay, so that's maybe where I'll leave it. I'm going to end the live stream in just a minute here, and then I'm going to put the assignment documents into course documents on Student Portal and into Microsoft Teams so that you'll have them, and then I'll give you the rest of the time today to do a little bit of research and see what you can find, okay? Maybe I'll just do that now, but while I do it, do you have any questions that you would like to ask me while I'm sitting here? Yeah. Do you have any questions you want to ask me while I'm here? Of course, you can ask me later. You can send me a message or an email or whatever. That's fine. If you want me to check something or comment on your ideas, that's okay too. I can do that. But if you have a question now, I'm happy to answer it. Just 1 second here. I'm going to answer those questions in 1 second. Okay. Okay, so Cindy's good, no questions. Thika's good, okay. When's it due again? I think it's due on the 21st of July, Karen. I have a due date at the bottom of the assignment. I think I put the 21st. Ella's good. Mashid is good. Ella's 21. No, you're not 21. That's the due date. Okay. Are we gonna pick on the list? Yes, you can pick any dynasty you want that we haven't done already. So don't pick the Zhou or the Qin or the Han, because we've done that already. Pick one of the ones that come later that we haven't dealt with. Oh yeah, thank you for mentioning that, Lim. If you could, please put it in a Word document or a Pages document if you're a Mac user, because I can do that too. And then email it to me when it's done. I kind of lost track of a few things last time because some people were emailing it to me, some people were sharing Google Docs, some people were doing a Microsoft Teams message with their paper attached. And as a result, I kind of lost track of a couple of them, and so I had to apologize to people for missing them. So if you could, just email it to me, and that'll make it easier for me to keep track of them and make sure I have them all, because a few of them got lost last time. So that's a good question, Lynn. Thank you very much. Yeah, please email it to me when it's done. Ying's okay, Carmen's okay, Michael's okay. Okay, I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna let you get to work. If you have questions, you can always message me, or you can ask me tomorrow as well during class. That's cool too. Okay, that's it. So I'm going to sign off. Thank you for being here today, all of you. Thank you for participating in the live chat. You did a really good job. There was lots of answers popping up there, which was really fun. I'll see you tomorrow. We will very quickly review China, and then I think we'll move on to Greece. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to set you free. Have a nice rest of the afternoon, and I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, so bye.